for joining me today, Ricardo.
No, thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here and to talk about this exciting topic, which is disinformation and its potential regulation.
Great. So, what led you into becoming a researcher in disinformation?
Well, this is a very, very interesting question, and I think it has a very interesting answer because it's very weird that a lawyer end up in researching disinformation in a way, especially when I started in 2019, 2020. So, how I arrived to this topic, I was doing my master, my LLM, my master in law and digital technologies at Leiden University in the Netherlands. And we started in September 2019, and very quick they asked to start thinking about the topics for our master thesis right away. And in October and November of that year, 2019, there was a social and democratic crisis in my home country, Chile. There was a lot of social manifestations. There was intervention with the police, even with the military. And believe it or not, Chile is a very stable country. So for us, was a really big surprise. And I was abroad, and there was a lot of disinformation in relation to this. So I didn't know what was happening in reality. And this was in, like you say, at the moment there was a disinformation, a fake news, misinformation, whatever you call it, all the time. And I was scared about what was happening. And when you are abroad, you are more scared because you are not there. And I said, this cannot be that this ecosystem was built for democracy, now it's built for the contrary. People are taking advantage of this, and what could be the role of the law? And I chose the topic, and was disinformation during crisis. And this was before COVID. And in the same, I remember my supervisor was not very excited with the topic. He said, Ricardo, but are you sure? Blah, blah, blah. This will never happen in Europe, blah, blah, blah. Then COVID arrived. And it was a mess. Even in Europe was a mess. And, and my topic stayed as a very controversial one. And until today, because well, in Europe now you have the war in Ukraine, for example, all this information. So, in a way, it's a very important topic that I don't know. I felt that I needed to do something, and I stayed there. That's my answer to your
And
question.
and how would you even define misinformation and disinformation?
Oh, there are many definitions, and there is no one global definition. So it's very complex. Imagine how complex is this information that we don't even know what is this information. So, but for me, it's like taking inspiration on the European Commission and the United Nations and other organizations. This information will be when you spread misleading or false content intentionally to cause public harm. That will be like a very broad definition of what is disinformation. This is not a legal definition, not at all. This is just policy definition or conceptual. So that will be disinformation when there is an intention behind to cause harm.
But there's a distinction, right, between misinformation and disinformation.
Yes, misinformation. Most of the biggest author on this area of this topic says that misinformation is when you don't have the intentionality to spread false information, even though this could cause harm. And the example that I always give in class is when everyone has a, well, at least I know in Denmark you don't use WhatsApp that much, but in the whole world everyone uses WhatsApp, and you have family groups, and there is always an uncle, an aunt, your mom, your dad, even friends, brothers in your group of friends, WhatsApp groups that spread this false information, misleading information, but they don't have the intentionality to cause harm, and that will be an example of misinformation. Disinformation, on the other hand, will be when someone intentionally want to, for example, tamper with an election, like disinformation operations from far extreme political groups or foreign states. Misinformation is the classic example of a family member spreading misleading content without intentionality to cause harm. But disinformation with a D will be foreign state operations that want to tamper with an election, extreme political groups, that they have an intentionality behind to cause harm. So that will be the. But this is very blurry, very blurred. Like this is what some
Hmm.
organizations have arrived. It's not my definition, but still it's something that evolves in time. Some authors say that we shouldn't distinguish. Some say we should. So it depends.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we consider information on the internet, which one do you think is most problematic? Misinformation or disinformation?
I mean, both can have the same consequence, but from a legal perspective, you could have more tools to address this information because there is an intentionality behind to take advantage of this of the ecosystem of the digital ecosystem. Misinformation, I mean, everyone not lie, but you everyone has sharing false information without intentionality because you believe it at the one moment and then it was not true. But at the
Hmm.
end, both have the same consequence or can have the same consequence. I mean, can start as disinformation, like a country meddling in an election, but then the people with will share that piece of content that is false without intentionality to cause harm, but still they are amplifying in a way the false
Right.
content.
And when you talked about your experience from Chile and COVID, that was even before, generative AI and ChatGPT kicked off. How do you think AI has changed misinformation, contra or disinformation?
I mean, I always tell this story in my class that we have been lying since human beings exist. We have been lying for political purpose, economic gain, or whatever reason you want. I mean, one of the most famous propaganda disinformation operation was in the time of the Romans when Julius Caesar was murdered and was Octavius and Mark Antony. And Octavius was smarter and he portrayed false stories about Mark Antony that he was a womanizer, a drunk, that he didn't represent the Western value of the Roman Empire. And he did it engraving this in the coins. So the coin was like the Twitter of the time, like the X of the time, because it was handed by hand by hand. Now you have AI, and AI can amplify this and make it much more real, much more precise, and much more massive. You can use bots to spread at massive levels false information, disinformation. You can have deep fakes that are created using generative AI that make it almost impossible to distinguish what is true and what is false. And you have micro-targeting techniques like what happened in Brexit, where you can target specific false content tailored to that specific group of people that they are going to believe it more because it's tailored for them. So basically, it's like this information with steroids.
Can laws be an effective remedy to this? Because as you said, people have been lying intentionally or unintentionally since the start of humanity, I imagine. So, is it really meaningful to regulate, and how should we regulate it?
I mean, this is a very complex question. Uh, there are still many discussions about should we do something from the legal perspective, from a regulatory perspective to address this information. And and this is my personal answer. I think yes, we should, but we shouldn't do to the level of the content. The law shouldn't have to place mechanisms to decide what is true or what is false. What the law should do is create a more transparent digital ecosystem so the user are more empowered to decide what is true or what is false. So, for example, instead of saying this picture has false content, saying this picture was created with AI. Then the user has to decide in the internal forum, okay, this is true or this is false. The same if something is targeted to you in Facebook as an advertisement that is clear that this is a political advertisement, who pay behind this and why you receive this
Hmm.
information. So you say, okay, I'm receiving this information because maybe I click like in this specific post and this is associated with this political party and you know that someone is behind this and if it's false, someone is paying for you to have this false or controversial information. So you can see this is not organic content. Uh, That's why when people say no, we shouldn't regulate this information, I say, okay, stop. Like, what are we talking about? I will never say this. I will never punish by via criminal law or even fines to someone that spread false information because that will create open a Pandora box of against freedom of expression. What I'm saying that let's create a more transparent digital ecosystem and put the pressure on the actors that are spreading this, like social media, for example, that have to label this, that have to comply with that, and only in the biggest one that they have the resource and the army of lawyers to comply with the law. I mean, Meta has a revenue that is the size of Slovenia, of a country. So we are not
Hmm.
talking about the small, more that are struggling day to day.
And isn't that pretty much how the EU law works today? Those things you mentioned.
I mean, yes, a little bit. Still, it's extremely complex because in the EU law there is no law against disinformation, but there are different pieces that indirectly address this phenomenon. I mean, there is no article that I recall in any of the regulations that mention disinformation. Some of the recitals mention about disinformation, but if you make an effort and you analyze how these different legal tools work, they are built to address these transparency issues, for example, that help this information to become the problem what is right now. But it's like it still is in the process of seeing what is going to happen because these laws are very new, and we don't know how they're going to play. Are they going to be enough or not? I don't know. And this is the beauty of this. Like, we're trying to organize this at this moment.
Yeah, okay. I don't know how complex this would be to get into, but could you just give a very brief overview of how EU laws regulate misinformation on social media? I know this is something you have studied quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's a little bit complex because it's different regulations that address this from different angles. But I mean, the best example and more direct example that I can give and the most easy to follow is the one in the AI Act, in the Artificial Intelligence Act, which is Article 50. Article 50 basically says that deep fakes have to be labeled as such by the person that created, and also the software that allow the creation of synthetic content like a deepfake audio or a deepfake picture. The software have to be embedded with a watermark that everyone can see that this content is inauthentic, is synthetic content, is not created by is created by a software behind. And these watermarks has to comply with some technical elements, so it's not easy to erase it. And it has to be also in the metadata. So, for example, if you upload this to, let's say, a social media, hopefully the social media will have automatic means to immediately detect that this is an authentic content. So this has also been labeled by the social media. And this why this is important, because this will allow the user to immediately know, okay, this is inauthentic and this is not real. Um, that could help, especially disinformation operations are extremely complex under specific scenarios like democratic crisis, elections, armed conflicts, especially in the first couple of hours when you don't know what is happening. And there is a lot of deep fake, like Iran, United States war that is happening right now. And at the beginning, I don't know if your Instagram was like this, but my Instagram was full of, I didn't know what was true or false. These tools are
Hmm.
supposed to allow you to know immediately, okay, this is false.
And it's especially, as you say, when there's a democratic crisis or a war, that is problematic that we don't know what is really going on if we follow social media. But it's a problem with traditional media as well. I suppose there was a lot of misinformation about COVID in the media back when the experts still didn't really know what the virus was. And I suppose the same as you mentioned your experience from Chile. I suppose that there were mainstream television channels that promoted misinformation as well. It's the same with, like in the US, say Fox News. It's like a propaganda tool for Trump, pretty much. It's not neutral reporting. Um, Social media, is it even that much worse compared to television, do you think?
I think so because most of the young people right now are being informed from political content, for example, about elections in TikTok. Most of the youngest generations, and I don't know how it's going to play in 20 more years or in 10 more years. I mean, the evolution of social media in the last 10 years has been exponential, in the way that now everything is there. And I don't know how much is the penetration of traditional media in comparison to social media right now. But I think that the problem with social media is that you receive something directly to your phone and you think that it's something organic, something that was that, and the television is something massive. So everyone is receiving the same. In social media, not everyone is receiving the same. So that's the problem. It's more personalized and it's much more, can exploit your fears in a much more direct way. Um, but the law is not a silver bullet, not at all. The law is one of the many tools that can help to address disinformation. I think digital education is fundamental because at the same time you have to teach people how to research news in social media, how they can think before click, and that's something that Nordic countries like Finland and country Estonia is not a Nordic country, or it is. I don't know.
Almost.
Well, let's say Finland and Estonia are the champions of this by far because they are in the border with Russia, so they are used to have disinformation operations in their society, and that's why Finland, from their 7, 8, 9 years old, they teach them the kids how to search, how to detect bots, for example, how to more or less know what could be the aspect of a deepfake video. Right now, it's almost impossible to distinguish, but maybe they can teach you a little bit, like the small details.
Yeah.
And that's fundamental because, my opinion is the role of the law is to give you the tools so you decide what is true or what is false in a more transparent way. Help you, not decide, helps you to understand what is out there, but education is key so you can make the decision there. So it's like, they work together, in my opinion.
And a related topic is hate speech. Like, for instance, in the UK, they have the Online Safety Act, and in the EU, we have Digital Services Act, which is not quite similar, but it has still been critiqued a lot because it, at least in the UK, people can get fines or even be sent to jail because they made a illegal statement, and it could be if it was it's considered as a hate crime, for instance, if you say something that is really racist or evil. How should the social media deal with hate speech, in your opinion?
I mean, hate speech is a little bit outside my area of expertise because it's a different issue than disinformation. Because when I define disinformation, I forgot to tell this. Disinformation most of the time is lawful but awful. It's legal but extremely harmful. That's why it's so complex to regulate it. But hate speech, when it address the hate speech, address the threshold of illegal speech, then you have much more tools to take down the content. Now, criminalizing this, I'm not sure if this is the right approach because also has a very powerful constraint against freedom of expression. I mean, if you are going if as every country has a different notion of what is hate speech. So
Mm,
from a European perspective, it's very difficult because in Germany, one thing can be illegal speech, but maybe that the same in Denmark is not. I
yeah.
mean, every country has a different threshold. So in a way, it's very complex, and but jail time also, I imagine, has to be reserved to the worst of the worst of the worst. because if not, you put a lot of pressure on freedom of expression and can create this effect, like polarizing effect, that you have the contrary outcome, that people will not feel comfortable to say anything because of the threat of jail, the inverse effect. So I
Mm.
think this is something that you have to be very careful and, of course, view with a lens of human rights, of freedom of expression, to see, because in many times the laws that are being proposed in the UK, for example, that has a lot of resistance in the EU and in all over the world. Sometimes the remedy is worse than the disease. The
Yeah.
law is a worse outcome than the problem itself. So here you have to be extremely careful.
So you mentioned in your experience from Chile that there was a lot of confusion about what is true, what is not true. Are there any other implications of misinformation as you see it, or is this kind of constant state of confusion the worst thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to link disinformation or misinformation with a specific outcomes of harm, like a specific, is very complex. But the first one that comes to my mind is COVID. COVID in the first weeks or even in the first months, do you remember we didn't have a vaccine? No one knew what was happening, and even some presidents around the world, I will not mention whom, but they told to the citizens that it was pure ethanol, uh, pure alcohol. Ethanol was a remedy, and there was a lot of disinformation going around about the potential effects of ethanol or pure alcohol as a potential remedy to COVID. And hundreds of people died because of this, of drinking, or poison, or because of drinking this pure alcohol. And then you have like a direct outcome of this information. Yeah, so especially in the first hours of first weeks of any major situation, this information thrives, and that's when bad actor, malicious actor exploit, because they want to crack society or they want to look better, so they make the other look worse, for example.
And you said that education is one important remedy to limit the impacts of misinformation. Are there anything else we could do, especially for older people who, for instance, there's this stereotype of like older people from the boomer generation who spend a lot of time on Facebook and believe everything they read. So they see like an AI generated image and they're sure that it's real, and they don't really care if it's real or not, because it made them feel something.
Well, I mean, it's difficult. It's you can always do not only digital education but media literacy campaigns. Like, for example, let's have one day a year of disinformation, against disinformation, where you go, you do in the media or in the newspaper, and you put links so people can understand how social media works and how AI works in very simple terms. But beside that, it's not too much what we can do beside. At least I think. I don't think that we have to censor people that like to share deep fakes, but something must be done. For example, I remember that in Brazil they were very visionary. In 2020, they present this law proposal, and they address disinformation. It was a law proposal on disinformation, and they address disinformation in WhatsApp or Telegram or whatever encrypted message, online message application. And that is very difficult to address this, because how you are going to address this is they are supposed to be private conversations, right? And what they did is, by law, they say that the architecture of the WhatsApp or the online platform messaging has to be designed in a way that you cannot share more than X amount of time the same content during elections, and because normally you share false information too many times. and it's like a viral effect. So they say, okay, during election, you cannot create WhatsApp group of more than X number of people. During elections, the same message, you cannot send the same message to more than 3 people. So there you create like friction.
Mm.
They're not they're not addressing the content, not at all. They're just saying, you know what, you as a user, Tobias, you cannot send the same message to more than 6 people in total. And during election, let's narrow to 3, for example. In a way, you create friction, so the viral aspect goes more control, and that's a way very smart way of legal design.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. If it was possible to label political content on social media feeds, um, the algorithms could even be designed to limit political messages to fewer recipients.
Yeah, I mean, that's what was that this famous author, Leipzig, that he say basically one of the how the law can address technology is by the design of the technology. So basically, the EU doesn't have this as a specific provision, but what about thinking more outside the box and in more extreme situations, mandate by law the neutrality of the algorithm for a specific amount of time, like in very, very, very dark scenarios, like because you need and come back to the Facebook of the 2008 where you only see like the publication of your friends in a chronological.
Mm,
But then also you have to understand that these are company and the algorithms, the way that they show advertisement, they hook you up. So it's a way also how the social media works. So they also have a right to do business. This is in the charter. So you have to be very careful on how you balance this. And
mm.
that's why, if you want to design a law, you have to take all these elements into the equation. And,
Yeah.
and that's why it's so complex.
So how do you use social media, and how do you receive news?
I don't use social media for news.
Okay.
I use it for very stupid things. My social
Okay.
media, you will see football, golden retrievers, pasta recipes, and some more stupid stuff. But I don't use it for news because I feel that it goes in a more, you see something and then they will push you something a little bit more
Mm.
uh, divisive or a little bit more controversial, and they push you and push you and push you. So that's why I'm very careful. But I also understand it's the way of how the algorithm works. It's like, in a way, they need you to stay. They have to make your feed attractive for you as a user. So that's why there is a balance.
I'm very conflicted about it. Like for instance, the social media network X. I deactivated my user after it was acquired by Elon Musk, but I wouldn't say I regret it now. But still, there's so much information on there, like in AI policy, for instance, or war
Yeah.
coverage. That is, it comes instantly, and it's really hard to get from anywhere else. So I suppose that on social media, if it was possible to screen through relevant information and find like genuine news coverage and like remove all the fake news, it would be like great to get real time information. But that's not what it's like, right? Like X, you have like you can't really distinguish between what is correct and what is wrong, and which views are informed and which are uninformed, and it's really chaotic. So I'm with you on that. I've actually deactivated my social media accounts on Facebook and Instagram. I thought it was just a waste of my time, to be
Yeah.
honest. I'm still on LinkedIn, but it's like there's so many AI generated posts there now too.
Yeah.
It bothers me. Of course, like New York Times and those mainstream media are still like great websites to visit to get news. But I wish there was another way of receiving like accurate information
Yeah.
about the world.
Yeah, no, no. What I'm also trying to say is that I don't think that the role of social media is to screen and decide what is true or what is false or what is important or not, because maybe we have the same political view, but if you don't have it, for you something important, maybe for the other is not, or for example, for the other will be important and true, and maybe for you it's not, or it's in the middle. Like not everything is black and white. Maybe it's in the gray area. what what I what I believe that the role of the law should be and push social media in that direction is that they have to give us the tools so we can screen more easy. Like for example, okay, there is a button is to change the algorithm, so only show you established news outlets, and then you decide which news outlets. If you like Fox, you like Fox. If you like the New York Times, you like the New York Times. But at least help you to screen more easy. If there is a deepfake video, label it as deepfake video. If there is an advertisement, political advertisement targeting you in a very controversial way, you know that this is a political advertisement that is labeled as such, and you know who paid, who is behind this. And if you don't want to receive it more, you just boop, silence this. So, and in a very easy way, because some of the things that I just told you are there, and the law says something about it, but in a very complex way. Like if you want to change your, I don't know how to change my algorithm in social media. Probably you have to
Mm,
do like five different steps, like boom, 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 boom. I don't know, but more easy and
mm.
push in that direction. And if the social media they are more relentless to do this, well, then you have the arsenal of whatever tool the EU law give the commission or whoever is in charge to address this.
Completely agree. Okay, Ricardo, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure.
No, thank you very much for the for this window to explain what I think the role of the law should in a very complex issue that is disinformation. And as I told you, this is developing as we speak, and there are many different opinions on what this should be or ought to be or shouldn't be. So this is a very broad topic, and every opinion is welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.